She said I wasn't husband material, and then not 5 minutes later, a helicopter landed in the backyard like she'd been expecting it, and everything I thought I knew about my marriage snapped in half. Welcome to Amelia's Stories, where the truth behind love and betrayal is laid bare. If you're new here, drop your location in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe, because what you're about to hear is the kind of story people think only happens in movies, until it doesn't. Ethan Mercer had spent months trying to understand what went wrong. At 34, a dependable mechanical engineer, he believed he was building a steady life with his wife of 7 years, Lila. But she had grown distant, colder with every passing week. So on that quiet evening at their lake house, Ethan finally asked the question he'd been avoiding, "Are we okay?" Lila didn't hesitate. She didn't soften. She looked him dead in the eyes and said he wasn't husband material, that he lacked ambition, that she was done pretending. Her voice didn't crack. Her hands didn't shake. It was rehearsed. Ethan barely had time to absorb her words before the thunder of blades cut through the air. A helicopter, a sleek, private one, descended behind their property like it had a reservation. Lila's expression didn't show surprise. If anything, it showed relief. And in that moment, Ethan understood. She wasn't just leaving. She had planned this. Every cold night. Every excuse. Every lie. This betrayal wasn't an accident. It was an exit strategy. Ethan didn't move at first. He just stood there, frozen, as Lila sprinted across the yard with a certainty that told him this moment had been practiced long before he ever suspected a thing. The helicopter door swung open and a man stepped out. Polished suit, confident stride, the kind of wealth that didn't need to be announced. Grant Hollister. Ethan didn't know his name yet, but he could tell instantly this wasn't a spontaneous escape. This was choreography. Lila didn't even glance back. She ran straight into Grant's arms and the two kissed like they were picking up where they left off. No guilt. No hesitation. No thought of the husband standing 20 yards away watching his marriage end in real time. When Ethan finally found his voice, it was met with the truth delivered bluntly by Grant himself. Lila had been with him for months. They met during one of her travel work weekends, a lie Ethan had never questioned. Grant wasn't just a fling. He was the reason for her coldness, her sudden resentment, and the cruel words she'd thrown at Ethan minutes earlier. The helicopter hadn't been a surprise for her. It was scheduled transportation. Her getaway, her upgrade, her chosen ending. She had waited until the very last moment to humiliate Ethan, making sure he heard every insult before stepping into another man's world. As the blades spun and lifted them into the sky, Ethan realized she hadn't just left him. She had erased him. In the days that followed, Ethan moved through the lake house like a ghost, trying to make sense of a life that suddenly felt unrecognizable. While gathering documents for their inevitable separation, he stumbled across something he hadn't noticed before. Bank statements tucked behind old appliance manuals, receipts stuffed into drawers, and transfer alerts he'd dismissed as monthly adjustments. Only now did the pattern become painfully clear. Lila hadn't just been distant. She had been siphoning money, slowly, deliberately, from their joint accounts for nearly a year. Small transfers at first, then larger ones masked as routine household expenses. She had been building her escape fund while eating dinner at their table, while telling him she was just stressed, while pretending their marriage still mattered. The more Ethan uncovered, the darker the truth became. A call from their bank confirmed withdrawals he never authorized. A conversation overheard between two of Lila's acquaintances revealed the rest. She'd planned to leave the moment Grant finalized his divorce, using Ethan's savings as a stepping stone into a new life. Ethan felt the betrayal settle into his chest like a weight he couldn't breathe around. Her affair had shattered him, but this theft, cut even deeper. It wasn't born from emotion. It was strategy. Calculation. A long game executed right under his nose. Financially drained and emotionally gutted, Ethan realized Lila hadn't simply abandoned their marriage. She had stripped it clean before walking away. In the quiet that followed each discovery, Ethan found himself replaying moments he once dismissed as ordinary marital stress. The late nights that couldn't wait, the sudden business trips she claimed were mandatory, the way she snapped at him for the smallest things. Each memory returned with a sharper edge now. What he once interpreted as burnout or pressure had actually been groundwork. Lila wasn't pulling away because she was overwhelmed. She was crafting a narrative where Ethan was the problem. He remembered the shift in her tone, the constant criticisms disguised as concerns, the way she sighed whenever he shared good news from work. She didn't want to leave because he wasn't good enough. She wanted him to believe it so she could walk away without looking like the villain. It was emotional manipulation dressed up as disappointment, and Ethan felt the sting of it long after the arguments ended. The lies were painful, but realizing he'd been conditioned to doubt himself, that cut deeper. Lila hadn't just betrayed him. She had rewritten their marriage in her favor, planting seeds of insecurity that he had unknowingly watered. Sitting in the dim light of the kitchen, Ethan felt something shift inside him. Not rage. Not heartbreak. Something colder, clearer. He saw now that she and Grant had counted on him folding, retreating, accepting whatever scraps they left behind. He straightened in his chair, jaw tightening. He might have been blindsided, but he wasn't powerless. And he wasn't going to let them take everything without a fight. Ethan knew he needed more than anger and suspicion. He needed facts. Solid evidence. Something that couldn't be twisted or denied. That's when he hired Carla Denton, a seasoned private investigator with a reputation for cutting through lies like they were paper. At 46, Carla moved with a calm confidence that made Ethan feel, for the first time in weeks, that he wasn't entirely alone. Carla dug into Grant Hollister's life with clinical precision. Within days she uncovered a disturbing pattern. Grant had a history of targeting married women who felt undervalued, promising them luxury and excitement. Meanwhile, their unsuspecting spouses slowly watched their accounts drain, their property shift, their stability crumble. All while Grant positioned himself to walk away once their usefulness ended. Ethan realized he wasn't the first victim. Just one of many. But the most startling discovery came when Carla traced a series of property documents Ethan had never seen. Buried beneath legal jargon was a transfer request bearing his signature, except it wasn't his. Carla confirmed what Ethan had feared. Lila and Grant had forged his name, quietly attempting to shift partial ownership of the lake house. And Lila, blinded by her fantasy, had no idea Grant was already pursuing someone younger. Someone he described in messages as a better long-term investment. Carla laid the findings on Ethan's table like ammunition. For the first time since the helicopter touchdown, he had leverage, real legal leverage. And with it came the beginning of his revenge. Ethan scheduled a meeting with Lila's attorney, a polished man who clearly expected another emotional, defeated husband ready to negotiate from a place of weakness. Instead, Ethan calmly placed the forged property document on the table, alongside Carla's verification report. The lawyer's confident expression cracked almost instantly. His eyes scanned the signature, the timestamps, the metadata, details that left no room for interpretation. "This," Ethan said quietly, "is a felony." The lawyer's throat tightened. He knew exactly what it meant. Charges, disbarment, financial penalties, and the collapse of whatever settlement Lila hoped to walk away with. He tried to suggest it might be a misunderstanding, but Ethan didn't waver. Facts were facts, and the lawyer had no choice but to acknowledge the severity. Word traveled fast. Within hours, Grant Hollister called Lila, not to support her but to distance himself. He claimed she must have acted on her own, insisting he knew nothing about the forgery. He painted himself as an innocent bystander, a victim of her desperation. Lila, who once ran into his arms without hesitation, now found herself shut out, blamed, and discarded. The reality hit her hard. The man she upended her marriage for was already stepping away, protecting his reputation while letting her take the fall. When Lila tried confronting Ethan, hoping for some emotional reaction, anger, heartbreak, anything, he gave her nothing. No raised voice. No trembling. No visible pain. Just a cold, controlled calm. And that terrified her far more than rage ever could. Ethan moved with purpose now, no longer reacting to the wreckage but actively shaping what came next. With the forged document authenticated and the financial trail clearly mapped, he filed motions to freeze every account Lila had funneled money into. The courts responded quickly. Fraud left little room for argument. The assets she thought she'd secured for her new life were suddenly locked behind legal gates she couldn't break through. But Ethan didn't stop there. He submitted a detailed report, including Carla's findings, directly to the state's Financial Crimes Division. Grant Hollister's name was tied to enough suspicious activity that investigators opened an inquiry before the week ended. Ethan didn't need to raise his voice or seek revenge through theatrics. The facts did all the damage for him. And the fallout began immediately. Investors pulled back from Grant's projects. Regulators flagged past deals. Former victims, once too embarrassed or intimidated to speak, stepped forward when they learned an investigation was underway. Grant's polished image started to crack, then crumble. Meanwhile, Lila found herself surrounded by consequences she never prepared for. Credit cards declined. Her lawyer urged her to consider a plea. Friends avoided her once whispers of forgery and fraud circulated. Through it all, she kept replaying Ethan's expression, steady, controlled, unshaken. The man she had written off as weak, predictable, not husband material, had become the very force unraveling the life she tried to build without him. For the first time, Lila understood the truth. Ethan wasn't broken. He was rising. News about Grant's investigation spread like wildfire, and the polished image he'd spent years crafting disintegrated almost overnight. Former partners stepped forward with eerily similar stories. Women who'd been promised the world while their finances were quietly gutted, husbands blindsided by drained accounts, deals that suddenly made sense only in hindsight. Grant's reputation didn't just suffer, it imploded. Investors backed out, contracts froze, and his name became synonymous with manipulation and fraud. Meanwhile, Lila's world shrank by the day. The accounts she once used freely were now inaccessible, seized under the ongoing case. Bills piled up. Her lawyer stopped sugarcoating the situation. And everywhere she turned, people whispered about the wife who forged signatures and ran off with a con man. With nowhere else to go, she reached out to Ethan. She showed up at his door, makeup smudged, voice trembling, insisting she'd been misled. Grant used her, lied to her, promised things he never planned to deliver. She said she missed Ethan's stability, his kindness, the good man she took for granted. She begged him to believe she hadn't meant to hurt him, that she'd simply been confused, overwhelmed, lost. Ethan listened, but only in silence. In his mind, her words were drowned out by memories. The nights she dismissed him, the cold remarks meant to cut, the way she made him question his worth to justify her choices. No apology erased the months she dismantled him piece by piece. So he kept a calm, almost detached distance. Not cruel, just done. And as Lila watched him turn away, she realized this was a loss she could never with quiet determination, rebuilding his life piece by piece. He started by returning to the passion he'd buried during his marriage, engineering custom engine parts. What began as sketches on a notepad slowly grew into something real when he bought a modest workshop on the outskirts of town. The space smelled of metal and machine oil, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt grounded. He poured his energy into designing prototypes, taking small contracts, and reconnecting with the side of himself he'd set aside for Lila's comfort. Each day brought a little more stability, a little more confidence, a little more of the man he used to be, only stronger, clearer, and less willing to dim his own light. Across town, Lila's world moved in the opposite direction. With her accounts frozen and no financial safety net, she struggled to keep up with mounting legal fees. The forgery charges loomed, and Grant, once her escape, her fantasy, had vanished entirely, refusing to answer her messages or acknowledge her existence. She was alone, facing consequences she never imagined when she stepped onto that helicopter. One afternoon, she drove past Ethan's new workshop and saw the sign he'd hung outside, the cars parked out front, the steady stream of customers. He looked focused, content, purposeful, everything she once dismissed as not enough. In that moment, it hit her with full force. She hadn't just betrayed a good man. She'd lost a future that could have been solid, loyal, and real, something Grant never offered her. Months later, Lila appeared at Ethan's workshop, hesitant and unsure, as if stepping into a world that no longer belonged to her. She had come seeking something, closure perhaps, or forgiveness, but Ethan didn't know yet if he could grant either. Her eyes searched his face for signs of the man she once thought weak, hoping to find the familiar vulnerability she could manipulate. But he was different now. Stronger. Steady. Untouchable. She spoke first, her voice wavering. She admitted mistakes, claimed she'd been blinded by her own desires, and hinted at regret for the pain she'd caused. She asked if there was any way to repair what she had broken, any chance for reconciliation, any ounce of mercy he could offer. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He let her words settle, let the weight of every insult, every betrayal, every moment of emotional manipulation she had inflicted linger in the space between them. Finally he spoke, not with anger, not with tears, not with bitterness, but with calm certainty. He told her plainly that she had broken something in him that could never be repaired. No apology could erase the months of deceit, no plea could rewrite the choices she had made. This was the ending and she had no authority over it. As he turned and walked away, Lila was left in the quiet she had created, surrounded by the absence she had once ignored. Ethan felt a strange, liberating peace. It wasn't born of forgiveness or closure from her. It was born from reclaiming control over his life and realizing that she no longer held any power over him.